systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What's going on, everybody? We're back talking some fights. 13 last week, big pay-per-view, awful pay-per-view on my end, amazing pay-per-view on Marley's end. We got to bow down to you, Marley. Great week last week. Helped a lot of members win. You took second, I believe, in the mini-max as well. So great work. I believe it was second. You were up there for sure, though. Great work. A lot of great calls. This week, I checked your content very briefly, at least your core report. I know we're different on at least one fight, which scares me, but excited to see who you're on. 14 fights. Hopefully we keep them. So far, only one weight miss, Lucas Alexander, by 2 pounds. Hopefully the 2 pounds still should stay on, just lose 30% of his purse, but still a couple fighters still needing to weigh in. So hopefully we keep all 14. 2 p.m. Eastern in the Apex is the start time, so a little earlier. How was your week going, Marley? Last week, again, great job. If you want to talk about that a little bit, what are your thoughts on this card?
Thank you. Yeah. It was my second week in a row trying out 150 lineups. Both weeks I got the second best lineup, so stings a little bit, especially because I had like 5 hand built and I put it in the qualifier. Came second there as well. So that was rough, but overall I think I only had one fight wrong. Hopefully we can continue the momentum on this card. I really hope to keep 14 fights. I think that will make it interesting because there's a lot of fights, maybe not full fights, but fighters that I think I can X out of my player pool or at least limit to like 10% or something like that just to kind of narrow down this 14 fight card. But I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be fun for DFS. We got 100K up top, so hopefully it'll be a good SHIPIT card. Oh,
yeah. More fights, the better, and more spread out. Ownership's more spread out, so I think it'll be a good one for sure. As always, watching live, watching on playback, all we ask from you is hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. Show's going live on this channel today. We got Coop and I talking NFL cash coming up after this show. And then on the Mayo Media Network, talking some NBA, nice slate over there. And if you do want our premium content at ShipNation.com, all of our fight breakdowns, fight rankings from Marley, core reports, projections, ownership, NBA, PGA, NHL, head over to ShipNation.com, monthly $69 a month. 6-month package, $59 a month. Annual package takes you to $49 a month. No better price in the industry with the Discord, which is awesome. College basketball going on, college football going on. We don't offer that, but we do have pieces in the Discord. Members run it. Smarty, again, I always shout him out, but he does a great job. Shout out to him. And before we even go into the fights, I'm glad you mentioned this, Ross, because I saw it on Twitter 2 days ago. Jordan Levitt did say his wife is supposed to go into labor. I think it's 5 days after the fight or something like that. But if she goes into labor that day, he would obviously pull out of the fight. So monitor that. I'm not messing or changing exposure, but at least we got a little heads up and we don't get something random. If it pops up, hey, at least he warned us. But any initial thoughts before we go fight by fight, Marley? 14 of them, a lot to talk about. But any thoughts?
No, not really. I was actually thinking about entering the 5-5-5 this week, but Levitt would probably be in my lineup, and I think he's scaring me away from that contest at least.
There you go. Maybe he saved you money. Maybe he costed you some money. But let's go so the Tapology, when I did this on our slate info page, that's free at ShipNation.com. It just says the prices and the odds and all of that. I did it in order. It was like 4 days ago. So Leroy Duncan's number 1 because Dennis Tallulah, he was supposed to fight someone else. So this isn't the official order. I'm going to go by our slate info, though. If you do want to follow along, I'm going in that order. For the most part, it's right, but I know it's not right for sure. They mess with the bout order a little bit. First, I'm going to say first fight of the night and keep doing it, but it's not the first actual fight of the night. Christian Leroy Duncan taking on Dennis Tallulah. 8,500 Duncan, 6,800 for Dennis Tallulah. Before I even talk about the prices, looking at the odds, Leroy Duncan, the second biggest favorite on the card at -500. Dennis Tallulah are plus 375. I don't see any inside the distance props. I'm on fightodds.io. I see under 1.5 at -115 at a lot of books. So I'm expecting a -250, something in that range. I don't see any right now, though, but I'll let you break down this fight. How I'll introduce it, though, is we're supposed to get Cesar Almeida a great kickboxer against Christian Leroy Duncan. Out is Almeida, in on a couple days' notice is Tallulah. Pricing was already released, so Duncan was a smaller favorite. His price doesn't move at 8,500. If it was repriced, he'd be 9,400, 9,500 on this card. So he's going to be one of the most chalky fighters on the slate. He's going to be favored to finish inside the distance. Tallulah, you get a lot of leverage. He is his appropriate price at 6,800. Now you can break down this fight and how you're approaching it.
Yeah, I think we're going to get two strikers here, but Leroy Duncan's just so much better, so much more dangerous in my opinion. Tallulah, I think his only chance is just to throw haymakers, try and knock this guy out. But Tallulah, I would say they're both susceptible to takedowns maybe, but Tallulah just looks so bad that I think Duncan probably has the edge there as well. I can't really think of any other pass for Tallulah other than the knockout. But if it comes early, he breaks the slate. I just don't think it's very likely. So I'm trying to X Tallulah out of my player pool. And I think Duncan's a great play at 8,500. It's just that he's the second or the third biggest favorite on the entire card at 8,500. So he's going to be chalky. And if he doesn't get an early knockout, I don't see him landing takedowns. If he's not getting knockdowns along the way, he's just not going to score great in a decision. So I think the ownership is kind of talking me off of Duncan and just hoping to fade this fight. And if he wins a decision, maybe he scores 75 points or something like that. But on paper, I am picking him to get a knockout. He probably scores 90 plus at 8,500. So if we're not thinking about ownership, I think he's a good play, and I am picking him to get a first or second round knockout. I just think he's going to be much better, more dangerous, harder to hit, and probably puts this guy away early.
Yeah, no, you and I see it the same way. His footwork's way better. He's a way cleaner striker. Tallulah, he literally just walks forward, head on the center line, he gets hit, and he just throws straight shots, and he has power. And if you're trying to make a case for him, very low own, leverage off one of the chalkiest fighters on the card. I prefer a couple other, or at least one other down there in that sub 7K range, though. So I ended up, I won't get to Tallulah in 20 teams or less. If he does win, I expect a big score, so I get it that way, and you get leverage. And I'm on the same side with you for Leroy Duncan, too, because I like Brendan Allen chalk more. We'll get to some other chalk. You can't eat it all. And Leroy Duncan, he's just a primary striker. If it gets outside the first round, second round knockout might not be enough. Like Brito Pierce, 8,400, 7,800. That fight's insane. Abule, we'll talk about that dude. I'm going to botch his last name the whole time. He's 8,400 against Medic in a fight that's supposed to finish. So that is a good range. Leroy Duncan's still going to be very popular. I think there's enough pivots. I lean Perez in that range. So I'll probably be under as well on Leroy Duncan. Yeah, on paper, though, in a vacuum, like in cash games, I assume I'll have Christian Leroy Duncan. He'll probably make the cash reports over here. But tournaments, I'd rather eat some other chalk, I think, just because he is just a primary striker. So we see it the same way. Let's keep it rolling. Next fight on the card. We got 1 second. Lucas Alexander, the one that did miss weight, taking on Jeka Sergey, 9,300 Alexander, 6,900 Sergey. Alexander, one of the biggest favorites on the card, I guess. Yeah, second, third biggest favorite, pretty much the same as Leroy Duncan, about minus 520, Sergey plus 405 on the way back. This fight's minus 240 to finish. Alexander minus 175 inside the distance. Sergey plus 650. Alexander is the third highest price fighter on the card at 9,300. Break down this fight.
Yeah, it should be another one with two strikers, where I think Lucas Alexander is similar to Duncan, where he should be the better, the faster, more dangerous striker, better all around, should be the minute winner throughout 3 rounds. But I don't think he's going to be looking for takedowns here. Sergey has, the one thing he's got is power. Like, he's got one-shot power. He's swinging bombs. He's trying to knock Alexander's head off with every shot he throws, I'm sure. So if Sergey lands it, he could be on the optimal. And I am more interested in Sergey than I am Tallulah, but I'm not really trying to pay $9,300 for Alexander. I do think that, what do we got here? Like minus 240 that the fight ends inside the distance. I mean, I think that's a little bit steep in my opinion. Alexander's got 3 knockouts, 2 of them. One of them's a referee stoppage. One of them's an injury. And then his other wins are all decisions. And then Sergey, I feel like this line is a lot of people fading Sergey because he just lost to Jubilee, who just lost recently and didn't look good, especially in that 3rd round. But I feel like Sergey was worried about the grappling from Jubilee, and that's why he didn't look good on the feet. But at the same time, we're not going to get that same performance from Alexander where he just dominates him on the ground. So I'm trying to get away from this fight. I think it's really knockout or bust for either side. It's just that if Alexander gets a second round knockout, he might not be on the optimal. If he gets a first round knockout, he still has to compete with everybody else. So I might just prefer Seregi because if he gets a knockout in any round, he's got a good chance at the optimal lineup. And I don't love underdogs on this card. So he's kind of my cheap, low-owned punt that I'm going to a little bit.
So I was debating going Sergey like 10%. Like the Paul Craig's the other one down here. I don't like Paul Craig, but like I'll fast forward. I just wanted to be more narrow on a path like this, and I didn't have any hot take fades that I'm just going to go all in, make a rule Craig or Allen in 20 teams or less. So I'm going to get like 20% Craig or something. But I was debating getting some Sergey because I agree everything you're saying. He has power. It's going to be on the feet. He's going to get the fight he wants. Like he looked bad in his debut, but before that, he beat up on cans, but he looks solid. He looks like he's power. Looks like he has finishing ability. But I kept diving into it. It's so hard for me to fade line movement like this. Alexander opened minus 150, and he's now minus 520. Like minus 150 to 130, and this line's it's been out for a couple of weeks, but steadily just has been on the Alexander side. The weight miss does worry me a little bit. But then you get into it. 3 inches in height, 4 inches in reach for Alexander. Sergey, all of Alexander's losses, 3 of them, all by submission. Sergey's not going to go to the mat. Like the way better striker is Alexander. The leg kicks are nasty. You can mix it up. So I don't know. I think at the end of the day, 20 teams or less on this 14 fight card, I probably will fade Sergey. Mainly the line movement and just hope other dogs. I'm expecting some dogs to come through. Do I need to try mine or plus 400? I don't know. The odds I'm always a sucker for. So any final thoughts? I'm just kind of your thoughts. I was initially going to want to get some Sergey. Then I'm like, you know what? I want another fade. Why play 10% in 20 teams or less? Now it sounds like you have some interest though. So I'm debating going back and forth. Final thoughts.
Yep. Well, my interest is a lot like the more fights we get into, you're going to see there's a lot of underdogs that I just don't like. There's not a lot of high ceilings for the underdogs this week. And I think if Sergey wins, it's a knockout, but it's more so just a fade at that $9,300 price tag on Alexander. I think he wins a 3-round striking match. And he won a striking match in his debut. He scored 76 DraftKings points, and that included a knockdown. So, I mean, now we're talking 9,300. I think he was a big underdog in that one. I'm not buying it, especially I would rather go with a guy who's going to look to grapple. Whereas at 9,300, I think it's almost first round knockout or bust for Alexander. And I'm never high on those guys.
Yeah, I hear you. He's minus 175 inside the distance, and in round one, he's plus 200. I have a little more interest there because Brendan Allen's 100 more, and there's definitely Brendan Allen is going to be one of the highest owned people up there, so that'll keep Alexander's ownership in check at least a little bit. But I think it will be a pretty fun scrap.
On the fight rankings, like the metrics, I put this as a 3-star because all the metrics look really good, but if I didn't see all those metrics, I would have made this a 2-star. Like I think maybe my third least favorite overall fight to target. But you're right. The numbers look good on paper.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind when building. Maybe I'll lower it a little bit. I'll have some Alexander though in the top tier. Next fight on the card. Again, 14 to talk about. Rafael Esteban taking on Charles Johnson. Esteban 8,200. Charles Johnson 8,000. The mid tier is loaded this week. This is another fight. It's projected to go the distance at plus 120. Esteban's a minus 155 favorite. Charles Johnson plus 135. I guess it's plus 120 at like one book, plus 160 at another. So somewhere in that range, it is favored to go the distance. Esteban plus 275 inside the distance. Charles Johnson plus 425. I'm looking at it as a clash of styles, a wrestler versus striker. Esteban making his UFC debut. 27 years old, looks like a primary wrestler early and often. I expect him to be shooting. Charles Johnson coming off what? Cody Durden took him down 11 times, controlled him a ton. That's the game plan he's going to try and replicate. Can he do that? Charles Johnson has a track and field background. He's got the cardio. So if he makes him work early, I mean, we have seen Johnson slow it. Like the Ode Osborne fight was so gross. I think it was on short notice for him, but usually his cardio is good. I'm kind of looking at an Esteban early or Charles Johnson can maybe wear him down. But in terms of DFS, it feels like Esteban's a way better play because if he wins the takedowns, control time, it'll be there. Whereas Johnson, maybe he loses the first 2 rounds or round and a half. He's controlled for 7 minutes, no points. And then he finally starts taking over wins a third round, but you can only score so much after that. So it's kind of my initial thoughts. But then you go to the ownership, Esteban might be 30 and Charles Johnson might be 20. So then you could go to some merit that way. So how do you see ownership going in this one? And how are you going to approach it? 8,200, 8,000, closest price fight on the card.
Yeah, I think I'm similar to ownership where I see Esteban being fairly heavily favored. And I mean, fairly heavily owned. And I do want a good amount of exposure to him. And then I think Johnson will go low owned, like a little bit over 10% is I think what I put. But I really have zero interest in Johnson. I think he has to keep this fight standing. But Esteban looks like the real deal on the ground. I thought he looked good. And Johnson has 5 UFC fights. He's been taken down 28 times in those 5 UFC fights. So, like, it's just the perfect game plan for Esteban to go out there.
Makhachev and Durden, like, yeah. I get it for sure, though. Still, Esteban wants to do that same thing.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm a little bit more impressed with Esteban's film than I was Durden's prior to that Johnson fight, to be honest with you. So I don't know that he's much lower than the Durden level. I think he can put up. I actually think he would control more than Johnson did. I think he's better on the ground. So he probably doesn't get up to 11 takedowns because he's not going to let Johnson get up that many times is how I see it going. But he could finish him on the ground. He doesn't even have to put up 100 points. And he's only 8,200. So I plan on being heavy on Esteban, and I'm going to X out Johnson because if he wins, I expect round 1 to be tough no matter what. But let's say he starts coming back in the second half of the fight and he wins the decision, he still probably puts up 60 points, something like that. So it's another first round or bust for any ceiling at John. First round knockout or bust for any ceiling on Johnson, and I'll fade that. Give me Esteban. And I think the line should be a little bit wider too.
Hey, thank you, Samir. Esteban, not Esteban. Appreciate that. We always appreciate, especially myself. I butcher a lot of names. I get that. There's a million DFS sports I play out there. Focus a lot on MMA too, but there's also a million fighters on the roster. So Esteban, I will butcher names all the time. Always correct me. Got to say hi to other people in here. Ben Jizzy in here, Ross K, and the Great. That was the only people so far. So hope everyone out there having a good day so far. A lot of people, of course, watch on playback. Give me in the YouTube comments. I do like monitoring them a little bit. Give me your favorite underdog of the week. 14 fights. So I think we should get a lot of diverse answers. Let's see some of those favorite underdogs of the week, and I'll be checking in on that. But hope everybody having a good day, have a good weekend playing. Next fight on the card, Jose Johnson taking on Chad Anheliger, 8,700 Johnson, 7,500 for Anheliger. Looking at these odds, Jose Johnson coming in, where is it? Minus 205 range, plus 175 on the way back for Anheliger. This fight is minus 135 to finish, plus 150 for Jose Johnson inside the distance, plus 325 for Chad Anheliger. I'm looking at it striker versus striker. And so this fight and the Aline Perez fight, I look at pretty much the exact same in the fact of it's going to now get the total ownership is going to be lower than I thought it initially was because Pierce Brito right in that range. Leroy Duncan now 8,500. The guy fighting Medic that we'll get to is 8,400. Probably will have a pretty good inside the distance prop. And you can pick holes in both these fights for sure for it not to be optimal. But I can also see it for sure be optimal. These two primary strikers. Someone gets bonked. Jose Johnson throws pretty good volume. This fight's favored to finish. So if someone gets bonked, it could definitely be optimal. Any Anheliger wins could be Johnson, the better striker, all that. Then you go to the Aline Perez fight. It's supposed to go the distance, but you can make a case for Aline Perez and the takedowns, and then Pudilova just the price and the money line equity to be on the optimal. So I'm talking a lot just slate overview, game theory when it comes to this fight. But if this fight was high owned, I wouldn't play too much of it because there's an easy path to not be on the optimal because I think it's pretty low owned. I'll naturally just have some of this fight. And I do prefer Anheliger to Pudilova just for the upside. So I'm going to have more Anheliger than I want because I do think he does lose. But how do you see this fight?
Yeah, I think this will be the lowest owned fight on the card. And it's my least favorite fight on the card because I do think it's two strikers. And neither one of them have like super knock you out power, but I do think Johnson's more dangerous. I think he's the better striker. He's got like a 6-inch height, 7-inch reach advantage here. So I just think all the striking goes in favor of Johnson, especially with Anheliger's like little T-Rex arms. Like, how's he even going to hit this guy, to be honest with you? I think it's a Johnson 3-round striking match where he wins with 60 DraftKings points or something like that if he's not getting any knockdowns, because they are both strikers. But my worry is that they both are terrible at takedown defense. And if someone looks to go exploit that, maybe they could have some success.
Please.
I say what?
Please. I want that.
That's what it would take. I just don't. I have a hard time seeing it really work, and I don't know who it would be. I feel like Johnson would be better there too. So since he's $8,700, I'm really not trying to play any Johnson. My plan is to X this fight out of my player pool, hope that Johnson wins a decision, and I don't think the score will even matter at that point.
He's 87, right? You said 89. Yeah, 80. He is 89. Is he 87 or 89?
8,700.
87. That's what I thought. Okay, I was making 87, 85, 75. Yeah, I think if someone, I think Chad will try and wrestle, because I expect Johnson, he's the way longer fighter, the taller fighter, throws more volume. Like, I expect him to be having the success at range. So I think Chad will try and force takedowns maybe, but I don't expect much success, even though Johnson's takedown defense is bad. I still think just his frame in general, or if he is taken down, I do think he can get back up. It's just mainly, like you said, you think it's the lowest total combined ownership on the card, and it's minus 135 to finish. Like, just hearing those words and that, like, I'm going to play some. That's just the nature of how then I can play Leroy Duncan in that lineup, or Brendan Allen, or more chalk around it like that. So I like Jose Johnson more than Ann Halliger, though. Because, man, his frame, his volume, he has power. I can see a pass. So it's not comfortable. I think more than likely it does go decision. It's probably pretty boring, but that's what ownership says. And I know Sheets will probably be on my side in this one as well. Let's keep it rolling. Next fight on the
14
card.
fights to work with?
I still think he will. Yeah. I do. We'll see. He always lets us know. Next fight on the card, Jonathan Pierce taking on Joanderson Brito. One of the best fights, real life DFS, 8,400 Pierce, 7,800 for Brito. This fight Pierce is about minus 130, Brito plus 110. This fight's minus 210 to finish. Pierce plus 165. Brito plus 165. Yeah, there's Sheets. Sigh, of course. I knew it. Know you too well, Sheets. But so both guys, Pierce is a small favorite. Both guys are plus 165 inside the distance prop. This fight's so good, right in that mid tier. It was going to be even higher earlier in the week with the Leroy Duncan if he had Almeida as an opponent and stuff like that. It's still going to be very high, though. I don't know. I guess I'll have first question, and then before you break it down, are you looking at it as a clash of styles, and then break it down?
No, not really a clash of styles. More of a clash of gas tanks, I guess.
Okay.
I think that Brito might be the better fighter in the first round. I'm more worried about him just cracking Pierce, more from like that PTSD of seeing Pierce get just mollywopped by Joe Lozon, which isn't a good look, especially when you're going against a powerhouse like Brito. So I think Brito's very live for a first round knockout. He's a good grappler too, good wrestler, but I don't see that going much past the first round. And he can't hang with Jonathan Pierce's, with his gas tank, with his pace. I just love everything about Jonathan Pierce's DraftKings style, where he's just trying to get the fight to the ground and he's nonstop. He's got 5 UFC wins. He's averaging over 120 DraftKings points in those 5 wins. I'm always going to be on those types of fighters. So I like Pierce to win. Well, I think he gets a third round submission. I bet that at plus 2,800, real small. But I think if it did go the distance, Pierce wins the second and the third if he doesn't win the first also. But I would say Brito would be the better striker, especially early. However, I think second half of the fight, Pierce could be the better striker just because Brito should slow down. Pierce won't. So give me Pierce to go 15 hard minutes if needed and still score well. Pierce is one of my favorite plays on the card. But this is my favorite fight on the card. I might have 50% Pierce, but I'll have like 30% Brito or something like that too.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on I think it's the Sabatini Lopez nightmares from last week, whereas I view this fight, Pierce just like Sabatini, Lopez very similar to Brito. I mean, Lopez might just be the goods, and I don't know if we'll have to see his cardio, but the fact of Brito and Lopez, I felt like would win round 1 at a pretty high clip, and the way more dangerous fighter. And Jonathan Pierce, Sabatini need to get the wrestling going, but Pierce is more of a drowning fighter. He's more dangerous. Brito does gas. We know he can gas more than Lopez. I'm on the Brito side for round 1, a little more of the $600 savings, but it's like I have no strong lean in this fight at all. If I end up with more Pierce in DFS, I'm totally good with it. Brito, totally good with it. I want to make sure to have plenty of both guys, though. It's my favorite on both sides of target for sure. So we're on the same page there. I just think Brito, I think he does win round one at a pretty big clip. I think Pierce needs the takedowns. I think Brito's just physical strength will have him to stay on the feet, at least in round one. And I think the power coming his way. Pierce is a solid striker. Like, I like what Pierce's game is. I got him getting boinked round one, but it's really, really close. Any final thoughts on that one? It's your favorite. You're going to be your highest own fight on the card. Or are you going to go all in the main event like I am?
I like this one just a little bit more than the main event.
Cool. Probably because of the Craig side. There's not much. It's tough to get to
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Next fight on the card, Mick Parkin, Caio Machado, 9,200 for Parkin, 7,000 for Machado, the only big boy fight on the card. No even light heavyweight fights. So just these two. Pretty interesting fight. You look at the inside the distance prop, it's minus, what do we got right now? Minus 190. So it's come down a little bit throughout the week. Parkin, a pretty big favorite, minus 350. Machado, plus 285 on the way back. Parkin favored to finish at minus 135. Machado, plus 525 inside the distance. But because of their price tags, like, Parkin's not going to be crazy owned because of Allen up there, multiple guys in that 9K range. Machado's going to be pretty low owned in this range down here. I don't know, low-level heavyweights. I don't know if that'd be, I can say that yet. Parkin might be all right. Trains with Aspinall. Machado, I'm not very excited about, but it's a greasy heavyweight fight, man. Crazy things can happen. People can quit. It can end up on the mat. Like, big scores. We've seen Alan Badeau in multiple big-time fights. Who's the other dude? The Michigan dude, very big. Why am I blanking on the name? I don't know. Anyway, we've seen some very gross big boy fights end with a lot of points. That's what I'm hoping for in this one. I think ownership's in check, minus 190 to finish. I think Parkin's way better than Machado in pretty much every dimension of MMA. Hopefully it does get to the mat, but yeah, give me Parkin in this one. I'll have some Machado as a dog for low ownership, though, just the nature of the fight.
Yeah, man, I want to X out Machado, but I mean, they're heavyweights. He's throwing bombs. If one of them lands, he can knock him out. So I don't know that I can X him out of my player pool, but I might just limit him to like 10, 15% max, something like that, because I think Machado sucks. Like, he looked horrible.
Yeah.
And he had like the easiest road I've ever seen to the UFC. Like, you could just look at his opponents and tell they can't fight. And then they go in there and they can't fight against him. So I don't even know why he's in the UFC. I think Parkin is much better everywhere. And I think that Parkin will go pretty low owned just by being around these other people in his range. And then he scored 69 points in his debut. So I think that'll keep his ownership down. He's somebody I think can get a knockout or just straight dominate on the feet. I think he would be the better grappler as well. Could finish it down there. I think Parkin gets a finish at some point in this fight. So I want to get some leverage to him. And with 20 or less, I will fade Machado. But if I do another 150, might have to keep him in the player pool just because I do plan on being overweight to Parkin, just kind of as a hedge, heavyweight type of hedge. But I don't believe in Machado at all.
Josh Parisian. I needed to find that name. Josh Parisian.
Yeah.
But
I think Parkin beats Parisian, right? I think
definitely
pretty decent.
No, I was saying Josh Parisian. He ended up with I feel like it was 130 points or something. I think it was against Alan Badeau.
Oh yeah.
He was completely gassed in the second round, and he just had a little more cardio. We saw Chris Barnett. Like all I'm saying with these lowish level, like any random thing can happen. If you watch Machado's last fight, I don't really recommend it, but if you want to just laugh at how the other dude even made it that far in his profession, like, it was the worst fight of all time on the Contender Series. Machado won, outlanded him by 5x the strikes, and he still looked awful. So I'm with you. But at the end of the day, just Machado's big. I mean, you can land something when you're big, and the other guy can go down. So when comparing him to the Sergis, that was the tough for me. Him and Sergey and the first fight, the Paul Craigs of the world, I'll have a little Machado, but I do like Parkin a lot in the upper tier. We'll keep it rolling. Next fight again. Appreciate the like button. Appreciate you guys hanging out. Hit that subscribe button as well. Helps us out over here. And if you do want to join us at chipandnation.com, head over. Do get in the Discord if you join. Monthly, 6-month, annual packages. Next fight on the card, Aline Perez taking on Lucy Pudilova. 8,600 Perez, 7,600 for Pudilova. This fight is one of the most likely to go the distance at plus, what do we got? Plus 195. So one of the highest favorite to go there. Plus 300 for Eileen Perez inside the distance. And Pudilova is, man, where am I finding? I got this all mixed up on Fight.io. It's in the slate info. It's tough. Plus 300 Perez, plus 525 for Pudilova inside the distance. I already talked about this fight. I look at it the same as the Jose Johnson fight. It's going to be a little higher owned, I think, but I like Eileen Perez to win, just like I like Jose Johnson to win. Eileen Perez has the upside with her wrestling. She was the hero for us last time out against Ashley Evans-Smith. 10 takedowns, 138 DK points or whatever. However, it's a tougher matchup for sure. I mean, Evans-Smith is so washed. Pudilova, she got robbed very badly, in my opinion, against Jocelyn Edwards. I think the takedowns are tougher to come by. I think her ownership, though, will be pretty low owned because people rather go up to, I think, Hooper, the low 9K range, or just go down to that mid-tier range. So I'm going to have her because I know the upside's there. But I like Jose Johnson's finishing upside way more than I like Eileen Perez's. So that's kind of how I compare these two fights. But I'm playing it because of the ownership, and I can see a path in a vacuum. There's other fights I like more. What about you?
Yeah, I'm all over Perez on this one. I think I was really impressed with her striking her last time out. I thought on the regional scene, she looked good on the ground. She's going out there mauling everybody on the ground. But I thought the striking in her last fight would be a little bit closer, and she looked real good. She's throwing powerful shots. So I think now she could kind of hang on the feet with Pudilova a little bit, but Pudilova's the better boxer, the much cleaner striker. So that's what she needs is a striking match, and Pudilova can throw with high volume. If it's a 3-round striking match, she's live to win. But I think Perez is live to knock her out just by the power she's throwing. But I really like her ground game. She landed 10 takedowns, had 12, 13 minutes of top control time in that fight. And she still landed 60 significant strikes on the feet. Like, she was just nonstop for 15 minutes. And those are my fighters. So even in a decision, I think Perez can outscore Johnson's in a finish. So I much prefer Perez in this one. And I really hope that the ownership's somewhat close because I'm down like 3. I'd go 4 times as much Perez, to be honest with you. So I'm heavy on Perez. I probably won't get to Pudilova. I want to X her out, to be honest with you. I think she's live to win, but if she does win a 15-minute striking match, does she score more than 10X? I don't know. And I don't think it's a 15-minute striking match. It'd be like her spending time, stuffing takedowns, getting up. So she's not landing for 15 straight minutes. So I just don't see her having much of a chance to score more than 10X.
So we got Eileen Perez at 35% sheets. We appreciate that. Yeah. The plug about our ownership. Marley's done a great job with that. So no, I don't think Jose Johnson, let's see what we have Jose Johnson at quick. Because I don't think it's going to be close for sure. 35 makes sense. People do love 11% for Jose Johnson. I definitely think that's closer to right. But we have Leroy Duncan at 38. I think it might be a little farther gap with the Leroy Duncans, the Perez. Pierce, you have at 38. I think that's right. So I do expect Perez, I guess, to get a decent amount of ownership. If it's 35, 38, I don't know. I think I'd rather go Leroy Duncan in that point. And ownership has surprised me a lot. You've been way sharper at ownership than I have for sure. So maybe talking through it more, if it is 38% Leroy Duncan, 35% Eileen Perez, I definitely lean the Leroy Duncan side. You're more confident in Perez getting the win. I think Pudilova can make it a little tougher. We're on the same page. I do not like Pudilova's ceiling. That's why you're talking about maybe Xing her. I just like 75. I don't want that at 7,600, but that could be enough. Like, there's a lot of these cheap dogs are all plus 300 and greater. If we just do see a 2-win underdog card, something like that. I don't know. It's interesting. I'll have some Perez at that ownership. I like Jose Johnson 11% more than Perez, 35% personally. And I like Leroy Duncan 38%. More than Perez, 35%. What's going on, Rummy? Nice to see you in here. Sean B in here, DFS, Rez in here as well. We'll keep it rolling, though. Plenty of fights to talk about. Next fight on the card, Nicholas Mata taking on Trey Ogden, 8,300 for Mata, 7,900 for Trey Ogden. Another very closely lined fight. Minus 130 is Mata, plus 110 Ogden, plus 185 inside the distance for Mata, plus 300 inside the distance for Ogden, and this fight is minus 120 to finish. This was the exact fight. I can't remember the exact one you said earlier, but if you didn't look at the props and you just went based on what you think, you would hate the fight. Like, I don't know how this fight's favored to finish. And the odds have came down. It was minus 175 at open. Now it's minus 120. So the money's going where I think it's going. But dude, Trey Ogden makes fights so boring. Like I see the exact same thing. Mata's got an awful chin, knocked out 4 of his 5. Ogden has no knockouts. He can't crack. Ogden's supposed to be a primary wrestler. He never goes down there. Like I hate this fight. And it's supposed to finish, but to play devil's advocate, it's going to be very, very low owned, right in sandwich in between the Britos, the Pierce, the Leroy Duncan. So if you want to get different, maybe Sheets, that's the approach he's going to go. I don't know, Sheets. I'm curious about what you're going to do, but I can get away from this on a 14 fight card. I'd rather play Jose Johnson, I guess is what I was saying at the end of the day when it comes to that. But do you see this fight, any potential in it?
Not much. I mean, just the finishing potential. If it goes the distance, I don't think we're going to get a high score from either of them. But I would still prefer Ogden because he's the more likely wrestler grappler. But yeah, I think this is a fight that it's not going to be in my single entry. I'm going to try and fade it with 20 or less, but I'll keep them in my pool for 150 only for their finishing potential. And then I'll cap their ownership. So I would cap Nicholas Mata's ownership at his first round knockout line, which right now is plus 400. That's 20%. So I'd put 20% max for Mata, and I would prefer less. And then I would cap Ogden's at his submission prop, which last I looked was plus 350. That's 22%. Maybe I go a little bit more on Ogden as in one of those fighters who can get 10x if he does win a decision. But this is a fight. It's my second least favorite fight on the card to target. I want to get away from it. But for me, it's more so Ogden or pass if I'm going to be hand building and putting one of them in my lineups.
I like it. You and I see it the same way. I'd probably be on the Ogden side too. I'll pick Ogden in the fight, dog or pass. But yeah, same approach there. My least favorite fight on the card. Last week's Optimal was 50K. Sometimes DK's pricing is sharp. It's all money line based. So you will see that sometimes. Hopefully not on this card. Yeah, appreciate that plug. Marley's done a great job. Most accurate. You've tracked projections ownership on the sites as always, or will be up pretty soon on the site. My man Siggy, what's going on? Rummy, Sean V. Hope everybody well. G Kiefer as well. Can't miss you down there. Good luck, G Kiefer, this weekend. Let's keep it rolling. Next fight on the card, the second of 2 late notice changes. Uros Medic taking on Orablai. I'm not even going to bother saying that first name. Medic 8,900, Orablai 8,400. Before I even mention the pricing and get to all that, looking at the odds, Orablai minus 143 roughly, plus 123 on the way back is Medic. Again, I don't see over-under prop, or I don't see inside the distance props. I see under 1.5, like plus 135, under 2.5 at a different book, minus 200. So would expect like a minus 180, something like that. So Medic 8,900 and Orablai 8,400. Medic was supposed to fight Johnny Parsons, was a decent sized favorite. It was 8,900, 7,300. Orablai gets the short, or Parsons out. Orablai the short notice replacement. Opens the dog. Medic opens about minus 135. Now Orablai, the line flips, and he's the favorite. He's priced like the favorite. DK got him at 8,400. Medic's price doesn't change. Now 8,900. And man, this Orablai dude looks pretty good. So I'll let you break down the fight. But just game theory wise, Medic will be one of the lowest owned fighters on the card. He's the dog. Price is the favorite. However, I expect decent inside the distance prop for him, even at that price. Orablai, I expect to get some good ownership. But Leroy Duncan being in that range will make sure it's not out of control by any means because he is priced efficiently with Pierce as well. So how do you see this fight going down?
Yeah, I never heard of this Orablai guy before, but I was already fairly low on Medic, and I was picking Parsons in that last matchup. So then I watched this Orablai guy, and I'm like, well, I like him a lot more than I like Parsons, so I'm going to favor him over Medic. And then they're hanging a minus 140 on me, which I think it should honestly be a little bit wider. So my plan, I'm just going to X Medic out and not eat that negative line value that we get there. But he could be the sneakiest, sub 10% owned play on the card because if he wins, it's probably a first round finish, maybe a second round finish. He is dangerous. But I just think I like everything about Orablai better. I think he's going to be the pressure striker here, pushing forward, landing the harder shots on the feet. And I think he's also the better wrestler in this one. And if he wants to wrestle early, I think that's going to take it out of Medic, and he won't look as good on the feet moving forward. So I'm on Orablai in this one. I'm going to get a good amount of him, I would say, because I am picking him to get a finish. but I would say he's primarily a striker from what I've seen. And if he does go out there and strikes and doesn't get a finish, he's probably not going to 10x an $8,400 price tag. But I don't know. I expect the inside the distance line to be pretty high on this one. I don't think the judges will be needed, but I do want to see what all these props are looking like before I make it official. But my plan right now is to X out Medic and be over on Orobai.
And if you like him that much, I think the inside the distance prop will be good for the price. And I think there's a good chance he comes in wrestling. His wrestling looked good, and Medic is most dangerous on the feet. Like, why not take the easiest path? On a couple days' notice, like, I was surprised. I didn't know about Orobai when I watched him. I was like, man, this dude looks to be pretty good. And like in our Discord, people were talking like he last 3 fights in LFA, big favorites in a lot of those fights as well. So people weren't surprised to see this line. Just surprised me on a couple days' notice. Like, can he go out and wrestle for 15 minutes? And Sean B made a good point 3 weeks ago. Orobai fought. It was a competitive fight until he got the finish in round 2. So I don't know. Is the weight cut pretty tough? Let me refresh to see. It was only Lucas Alexander by the time when we opened the show that missed weights. Is there anybody else? Still seeing just Alexander, and a couple we're still waiting on to weigh in, but he made weight 170. So yeah, I don't know. I'll ride you here, but I like Orobai too. I'm picking him. I think he's going to wrestle, and just this line, this confidence on short notice, it was enough for me to go that way. But if Medic is going to be 10%, 8%, and probably not even 10%, it could be very well the lowest owned fighter on the card, or down there with those big punts. I think I'll take a shot. He is dangerous enough on the feet. I think the inside the distance prop will be there, and you get leverage off of Orobai. So I'll probably get some Medic at plus 120. He's a dangerous striker. At least I know he has first round KO upside against anyone. So I'll pick Orobai. I'm going to probably get a little Medic though in this one. Rummy and Big Marley in sync this week. Hey, it's good to ride with Big Marley after last week. No doubt about that. Let's keep it rolling. Next fight on the card, Amanda Ribas, Luana Pinheiro, 9,000. Ribas, 7,200 for Pinheiro. Ribas coming in minus 230, plus 195 on the way back. This fight's plus 120 to finish. Ribas plus 255, Pinheiro plus 320. Pretty low owned fight again. Probably one of the lower owned total fight combined ownership fights on the card. Can you make a case for the favorite or the dog in this one?
Yeah, I want both sides of this fight, actually. I really think Pinheiro's only in play for her knockout potential, but she does throw power, and Ribas has a questionable chin. She's been knocked out 3 times by people who maybe have less power than Pinheiro. So I do want some knockout exposure to Pinheiro here, but it's more so because I like Amanda Ribas. I think she'll be pretty low owned, and I think she could go out there and grapple for 3 rounds and score 110 points in a decision. I also think she's the better striker over the course of 3 rounds. Maybe the first round's close, but I like Ribas to be the more skilled striker, especially the longer the fight goes. But I'm more impressed with her grappling. I think she could submit this girl. And if Pinheiro starts to slow down like she would have before she looked for her way out in that Marcos fight, I think that Amanda could really put it on her late. So I'm going to be overweight to Amanda Ribas, and I'll probably be right around the field on Pinheiro. I said in my fight rankings that I would probably want to max Pinheiro at whatever her TKO line is. And right now that's about 18%. That looks good. That looks good in my head, but I did my first run on the solver with 150 and I was like 32% or something like that, because I am Xing out quite a few people on this card. So I might end up with more Pinheiro than I want, but at the same time, I'm not okay with 32%. I'm trying to get that a little bit closer to the 18, if not even lower. So Ribas is my side in this one. I think she wins on the ground.
Yeah, well, you and I see it the same. And I think Ribas can be pretty low owned too. Pinheiro, she's going to get some ownership as the dog. Usually the dog ownership pretty spread out. I want to be underweight on Pinheiro, though. I feel good about Ribas. I think she's the better striker. I think that is where she can get caught, though, like you mentioned, her chin. But if she does that, then I think she wrestles. And both these girls' backgrounds in judo, but I think Ribas is on another level when it comes to MMA wrestling. So her ownership, I think we can see a Viviane Araujo approach like 2 fights ago where she put up 116. A lot of control time, get it to the mat, pretty low owned. So Women's MMA favorites, man. It's how many times has it burned me in my life? Why not go back to the well and lose a little more money on it? So he boss the pick. Don't like Pinheiro very much, but her win equity for the price, I get it. She will be in my pool, but I will cap her ownership. A couple more fights on the card. Actually, still a decent amount of fights. Peyton Talbot taking on Nick Aguirre, 9,500 for Talbot, 6,700 for Aguirre. Looking at the odds, Talbot is the biggest favorite on the card, minus 700 to minus 800. Aguirre plus 500 on the way back. This fight's minus 200 to finish. Talbot minus 185 inside the distance. Aguirre plus 950. Now this is a clash of styles. Talbot wants it on the feet. Aguirre wants it on the mat. Talbot making his UFC debut. I was definitely impressed with him on Contender Series. My favorite performance all year. However, he's still 25 years old. He's hittable. He can leave his chin up. He does some spinning stuff. You can grab his back, maybe peel him to the mat. The takedown defense held up, but it was also Tracy Cortez's brother. He's 0-2 on Contender Series. Talbot definitely broke him. So I don't know. These odds feel wide. Like if I got to bet, it's dog or pass all day, and I think there's probably value there. I'm not going to do it pre-flop. I want to wait for the live bet. If Aguirre drags him to the mat early and the number's still big, I'll probably go that way, and that's how I'll get my Aguirre exposure. But I don't know. These odds feel a little wide, but yeah, the pick's Talbot. His striking is definitely crisp. He can keep it for 15 minutes. He mixes it up well. But how do you see this fight?
Yeah, I think Talbot should have a huge striking edge in this one. He threw 300 total strikes in that Contender Series fight, which I love to see. I love when guys aren't wasting time with their 15 minutes in there. So big fan of the striking. But, man, this guy is super hyped up. We got Rummy in chat saying future champ. That's the third person, at least, that I've heard say future champ about Talbot. And that didn't cross my mind at all when I watched.
That's because he walks like it. He talks like it. He's got the sway. People compare him to O'Malley. I honestly think the swagger and charisma of him, because he was fun to watch. Like, I agree with you there. I don't know about all that, though.
Yeah, and I mean, he is only 6-0. So I think the line is getting out of hand at this point. And, I mean, if you're going to throw 300 total strikes, I guess 9,500, I don't really care what you're priced at if you're throwing that much. But Aguirre is not going to want to strike, especially eating anywhere near 300 strikes. I mean, he only landed like 160 or something total. But Aguirre's not going to want to stand for that long. He's going to be shooting as soon as possible. And I did think Talbot was held against the cage and he was taken down in a couple fights. So I think Aguirre could have some minutes of success in this fight. I think for him to win, he's got to lock up a submission during any type of ground fight. But I don't think Aguirre can keep it on the ground. And I also thought Talbot had really good takedown defense. So I think it's just more that Aguirre is going to be taking away from his striking time by holding him against the cage. If he can get it to the ground, that's even worse. So just the 9,500, it's a lot to pay. I also think he's going to be chalk. So I'm just trying to get away from this fight, hope that Talbot scores 85 in a win. But I'm picking him to get a knockout. I just think he's got, levels better striking than Aguirre. And once these takedowns start to fail and Talbot starts to pick up the pace, I think it'll be over. I picked him third round knockout. I'm just hoping that it's not enough points because I'll be under the field on him. And I'm probably fading Aguirre. But it is kind of like a striker versus grappler matchup where maybe he does have an edge if he can get the fight to the ground. If he locks up a submission, nobody's going to be on him. It would kill off half the field. So I think 5-10% Aguirre might end up in my 150.
Yeah, I mean, in my 150, I might end up with that. In 20 teams or less, I know I'm not going to end up with any. I think it's a fine play, though, because if he wins, it's going to be wrestling. It's going to be takedowns. Maybe he grabs something. Like, it's going to score well. You get leverage off, and you mentioned Talbot, so our ownership, don't want to give away all of our ownership, and if changes aren't made, we do update it and let everyone know, but Talbot at 44% and Brendan Allen at 44%, and if that's the case, I much prefer the Brendan Allen side as well. Definitely will still have some Talbot, like you said, he throws a ton of volume, but he's gonna have to fight off a lot of takedowns, and maybe it can just be a second round or a third round knockout. And he doesn't get all the way up there in volume. But at that ownership, I prefer Brendan Allen, who can peel to the mat. I do know that for sure. But I'm excited for Talbot for sure. Hey, future champ on me, I'll remember it. Marley said he's seen 3 already call it. I loved what I saw in Contender Series. He's still young, though. He definitely has a lot of improvements he can make. He's definitely very talented and special, no doubt about that. And I'm very pumped to see that fight. Let's keep it rolling. We got 3 fights left on the card. 3 fights. Chase Hooper, Jordan Levitt, 8,800. Chase Hooper, 7,400 for Jordan Levitt. This fight is almost a coin flip to finish, about -105. Chase Hooper -195. Jordan Levitt +170. Chase Hooper +170 inside the distance. Jordan Levitt +400 inside the distance. This is the fight I mentioned pre-flop. I know we're disagreeing on this one. I'm now very scared. Maybe I got to even my ownership a little more than I initially had. You've been on an absolute roll, seeing things well. But why is Jordan Levitt going to beat Chase Hooper this week?
So I think the line has a lot of recency bias with Hooper in his last fight, landing like 154 significant strikes, I think it was. Landed a lot of strikes. And now he's a high-paced striker, people are saying, and he's got great grappling. But I'm just kind of pulling back on that high-paced striker. He was fighting a gassed-out fighter for 2 rounds, basically fighting a punching bag. I'm less impressed that he couldn't finish the guy, to be honest with you. If you're landing that much. So I do not think Hooper has a clear striking edge. I think Levitt is going to be throwing the harder strikes. Hooper's going to be eating them way worse than Levitt's eating them. I think I think Levitt's in play for a TKO at some point, really any point. But Hooper should still be the higher paced striker. I just don't think it'll be anywhere near 154. I also don't think it'll be anywhere near as close. I mean, not as close, as wide as that last striking match was. I think Levitt will be more in there. And then these guys are both grapplers. So if the fight goes to the ground, who is the better grappler? That I don't know. I think either one of them could get a submission in any round, but I favor Levitt to be the better wrestler, to have the better takedown defense as well. So I think it's much closer to a pick'em fight than it is 2-1 Hooper. I did bet Levitt earlier in the week. He's my favorite underdog on the card. I think he could score well with any win, but I think he could finish on the feet or the ground and just break the slate. So he'll be my favorite underdog on the card.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue it. Like, how many times has Chase Hooper burned us? And Levitt, it's 2 primary grapplers going at it. I get it for sure. I'm more confident in the strike. Like, I like Chase Hooper at 155 a lot more than 145. I like his frame a lot more. He's putting on muscle. He's filling in. He got thrown in the fire, obviously, earlier in his career. Alex Caceres at 20 years old. And that ain't great, Dana. But I like the striking. You mentioned Levitt. All he does is throw calf kicks. And I love me some calf kicks. They can hurt, but I don't know. I'd be shocked if he knocked out Chase Hooper. I still think Hooper striking is coming together on the mat. I do favor Hooper, but I don't know. -200, I'm not betting it by any means. I get everything you're saying with how hot you've been. Maybe I'll reconsider the underweight tag I have on Levitt, or maybe close my exposure a little more. But you've been on a roll, man. You're seeing things. Hoop Levitt on the feet. I don't know about all that, Romy. But hey, we got 2 fights left. Marley's actually been on a roll. There's no chirping going on by 1 bit. And you can never chirp $100 pick, man. You need dogs on this card. I'll raise mine a little more. 2 fights left. See if you're
But I mean, now that I'm like 50% Levitt, his wife's definitely going into labor. Like,
yeah.
right when the card starts.
Then it's back to that. Yeah, we mentioned that pre-flop. His wife's supposed to go into labor a couple days after. He said, obviously, if it's that day, he'll pull it. I mean, we should get that news ASAP. Like, he would put on his Instagram or tweet or something. So you'd really have to run. It is a 3rd last fight on the card on 14 fights. So you do have 5-hour window, 6-hour window that you're playing with fire a little bit, but hey, you can do it. Thanks for that. Esteban looked horrible at weigh-ins. Gonna have to check out weigh-ins after, but thanks for that. Updates. 2 more fights left on the card. Co-main event time. Michael Morales, Jake Matthews. 9,100 Morales, 7,100 for Matthews. -330 is Michael Morales, +270 on the way back for Jake Matthews. This fight's -180 to finish. Morales -115. Jake Matthews +425. What's your interest in this fight for real life entertainment value as a co-main event? And then what are you doing in DFS?
I think it's a good fight to see how good Morales is. I think he is the real deal. I think he could possibly be a champion one day. I like his striking. He's powerful. He's got good wrestling as well. So I like him to win the fight. But It's his toughest test to date. I don't know that the striking is a huge gap. I think if there's a knockout, it will be Morales. But Matthews might be the better grappler. So I would worry, like, if Morales ends up on his back or if Matthews can just get on Morales's back. I would definitely worry about that. And I think Matthews is in play. I think he'll be low owned. In my opinion, this is kind of a fight where I'm just okay with either guy. I'm picking Morales to win, but I'm picking him to win by a decision. And the only way he's going to score enough to make the optimal lineup in a decision would be for him to wrestle, in each round, probably. So I don't love the $9,100 price tag, but I think he's in play for the knockout as well. So I'll get some of them, but maybe like 20%, something like that. And then Matthews is just in play as a live dog. He's super cheap. If he wins, I would expect him to score 10x. But if he can wrestle and then get a submission, he could get 90 plus points in this one. And it's kind of like a whoever ends up as the sixth spot in my lineup type thing. If I'm hand building, if I have $9,100 for that last spot, let's go ahead and throw Morales in there. But if I've already used my favorites, I got 7,100, then I'm cool with Matthews as well. But I'm not going to start any hand built lineup with this fight. So it's just more of a last ditch effort where they both have ceilings, but I'm picking Morales to win and score 75 points, something like that.
Yeah, we pretty much see it the same. I'm picking Matthews because I think the line's a little too wide and I need some dogs on this card, but I still take Matthews and Morales is underweight because I don't love the upside in this fight. Like, the props are pretty good on Morales and the ownership's pretty solid, but I do think the odds are too wide. Like, he didn't look that great against Fugit. The Max Griffin fight was very close. Jake Matthews, he's been around. I mean, he's fought a bunch of people. 2014 was his debut. He's only 29. He hasn't lived up to the hype, but still can strike. Like, if you go back and watch the Fiallo performance, he looks like the greatest fighter of all time. Like, he has that kind of upside. He's not lost on the map by any means. So Morales does have a big reach advantage, 25, undefeated. I do think he is the better wrestler, the stronger fighter, which is why I don't love Matthews' grappling upside, which is kind of why, like, I'm picking him, but I don't even love his upside compared to other dogs on this card. But I do prefer I prefer Matthews in the savings over Morales as a spend in DFS. But like you said, if I have 10% Morales, 15% Morales, I'll be under the field. But he is minus 115 inside the distance. He hits hard. Matthews' chin is some questionable. Like, you can make cases for it. But there's plenty of other fights I like more. So pretty good real life fight, like, talent wise. But that two talented guys can clash and it'd be a very boring fight. Because it's technical, and I could definitely see that route as well.
It kind of reminds me of this is the co-main event. This is the co-main event because of Morales.
Yeah.
The last time that happened, it was Bonfim, and he got destroyed. So I'm like, shit, maybe I need a little bit more of maybe not more proven guy, but the guy that grew up in the UFC. Like, Matthew's been around forever. So I think he's somewhat live in this one. I could see me being like, I think he's going to be like my third highest owned underdog, third or fourth, something like that. Levitt will be first. Probably Craig will be second.
Let's take
and then maybe Matthews, Pinheiro, Ogden, one of those three. They're all like the same to me.
I'll say this, is I like hearing this and then hear my man Siggy saying you've heard multiple people, the more and more it makes me like Charles Johnson. Because he's going to be down there in ownership and he can't put on a pace. So we got one fight left on the card. You mentioned the Paul Craig. I'm excited to hear what you have to say. I already kind of tipped my hand early, but Brendan Allen, Paul Craig, 9,400. Allen, 6,800. For Paul Craig, minus 440 is Brendan Allen. Plus 340 is Paul Craig. This fight's minus 800 to finish. Brendan Allen, minus 300 inside the distance. Paul Craig, plus 375. And yeah, my approach, I'm just 20 teams or less. I'm going all in. I'm making a rule. Give me one fighter in this one. I went back and forth on this. My quick logic is I don't think it's the right thing to do or anything like that, but I want my path to be more narrow. I'm not making any big fades like Sergey is a fade or Aguirre is a fade. Like, they're going to already be low owned. I'm going to play some Leroy Duncan and those guys. So how do I make my path more narrow to have a better chance to ship? Going all in on a certain fight. I debated the Brito Pierce one. I debated this one. I decided on this. Paul Craig, his fights usually score very, very well. Allen has so many outs. So 20 teams or less, I'll go all in. I think I'm going to like 80-20 range, 20, probably still overweight on Paul Craig, at least with the field. And I think Brendan Allen styles on him more times than not. It can knock him out. I think that's what he does. Like, why even take it to the mats? But if people don't make that rule, I don't think it's wrong by any means, because Alexander can outscore him. Talbot can outscore him. Hebas can outscore him. Like, there's routes where Brendan Allen scores 102 and it's not enough for the optimal, and it gets left off. So just wanted to clarify my thought process. 150, I won't make the rule, and I'll probably have more Hebas, Talbot, and all of them in 150, where I'm not making the rule to jam Allen. So Allen's the pick, though. I think he has him covered everywhere, but so does a lot of people until Paul Craig grabs something.
Yeah, I mean, the grappling is what's close. Like, if these guys are just rolling around, I mean, I think Craig's the more dangerous submission artist. Like, if Allen gets a takedown, I'm still worried about Allen getting submitted, where if Allen's on his back, I don't think he's going to be throwing up an armbar on Paul Craig. So I do think it's submission or bust for Craig. But, man, I think he's live for that submission. And if he gets it, he's going to score well. But on the Allen side, I think he is the better striker. I think he's the better wrestler. So it would be smart of him to keep this fight standing. And if he does, I think he needs a knockout, an early knockout, to be able to score more than 10x that $9,400 price tag. And I don't know that that's the case. I think it would be more later, once Paul Craig starts to slow down, once those takedowns, once he knows those are failing and he's got no real shot. I think that's when the knockout comes. So I picked Brendan Allen to get like a third round TKO. And if that's the case, he probably scores less than 90 points, probably like in the 80s or something like that. He has a third round submission a couple fights back over Muniz. And that's kind of how I see this fight going. It's two grapplers, probably stays striking more than we want. Allen's not going to be blowing the doors off with his volume. He's also not a big power puncher either. So I think Craig just tries to avoid the big shots. We get a boring fight for a couple rounds, and then the finish happens. He just doesn't score enough. So that's kind of how I'm seeing it, to get away from the ownership. But at the same time, he could finish him in any round. He could wrestle if he wants to. He could submit him. So there's lots of ways for Allen to score well. I want to be heavy on the fight. I said in my notes, I haven't done my lineups, but I see me being like 30, 40% Allen, maybe a little bit more, and then 20, 30%, maybe a little bit more on Craig. Second favorite fight to target on the card. But if I was Allen's coach, man, I'm telling him to keep this fight standing. You're not going to lose any rounds doing that. So take your time, be patient, don't rush anything. And if that's the case, you're not going to score well. So yeah, I think we can get away from it.
Yeah, no, you easily can get away from it. 14 fights, like there's so many paths. I'm mainly doing it because I want to get more narrow on a thing. I just think if we see it on the feet the whole time, like he's at least getting one knockdown, and I think we're seeing multiple knockdowns. Like, all right, knockdown, he flops to his back. It's like Mackenzie Dern and Andrade. You got the stone cold nuts. It's like, hey, come back. I ain't going to the ground. Come back up. And you can get all those knockdowns add up. So that's what Allen should do. What people should do is not always how it ends up, though. But, man, yeah, monitoring weigh-ins. Hopefully the Esteban fight's still on. Hopefully we still get 14. 13 is not the worst, though. So especially what we've had recently. I'm a little nervous, though, now. Marley's saying reasons this fight couldn't be optimal. He likes Levitt. Man, Marley's on fire, and it's tough to fade him. So what are your final thoughts, Marley, before we get on out of here?
Man, final thoughts. I'll put it all in SHIPIT Nation over on the MMA Fight Rankings. I got my whole plan of attack mentioned in there. At the bottom, I have my final thoughts for the card. So you can go there to see exactly how I'm attacking this card. But I would say my final thoughts would be to good luck to Tambo this weekend. I got my King of the Beach gear on, rooting for you. Take home that first place trophy down in Miami. But yeah, man, let's ship it. Good luck to you. Good luck to everybody listening.
Yeah, a little bittersweet. You and I obviously wish we could have got there. You were much closer than I was. So feel free, Big Marley. But Tambo, take something home, and Big Marley, let's take something home in UFC. You've been close. Your time's coming. Appreciate everyone hanging out as always. Looking forward to 14 fights, 2 p.m. Eastern at the Apex. Head over to ShipItNation.com. Monthly, 6-month, annual packages. I'll be talking some NFL cash games in 25 minutes with Hoop, NBA on later as well. Good luck, everybody, to all sports this week, and let's make some cheese. For Marley, I'm Titletown. Have a good one, everybody.